Hello everybody, welcome to our webinar. From Zero to Hero, it's really nice to see you all. My name is Michael and I'm a teacher for Viz Academy. Viz Academy is an online school that will teach you how to create beautiful shots just like this and much more. So let's get started. Those of you that are here again, welcome again, and those of you that just joined in for the first time, I'm also welcoming you. So if you want to learn more about us, remember that Viz Academy has we have our own website that you can visit. Okay, so we've got first questions. Is this going to be recorded? Honestly, yes, but this is not going to be one of those webinars where we might not really post it later. This is going to be available to you all, but I don't know, felt cute, might delete later. You know what they say. So just making a webinar. Anyway, today we're going to talk about this Basaus restaurant, which we're going to be building from scratch. Hello, Serbia. Can you can you turn on subtitles? I don't think it's possible to turn on subtitles for a live webinar, but we're going to try to figure out something that might help you in that case. But for now, let's just dive into it. So you might have seen a short video that we posted on our Instagram a few times and our other social media. So we're going to today talk a little bit about creating this beautiful restaurant from scratch. But where do you want to start? Do we start with 3D model or do we start with something that's going to be a little bit closer to a pre-made model? I know that we all came here for the From Zero to Hero, but I think it's going to be the easiest to really go over each step, but based on our main scene. So everybody can see what the end result is, and I'm going to be copying some of the elements because I respect your time, so we don't want to remake absolutely every box that's in the scene, but at the same time I'm not going to be skipping those elements that you're going to be asking about. So let's get started. Subtitles on. I really don't think we can turn on subtitles during a live webinar. There's no technology for that yet. Really nice to see you all. Hello from Turkey. Hello to Turkey, I would say. Okay, guys. So where are you from? I see that there's a lot of you. Oh, and there are my students. Welcome, Prem. It's so nice to see you. Oh, I can see Stas. I can see you guys. So it's really nice to see you in our audience. But without any further ado, let's actually get into our work. So this is the basis for our scene. This is going to be the shot that we're going to be working on, and pretty much we're going to make it happen step by step, one element at a time. So we're going to need to start with some kind of floor plan or some kind of reference image. And for that, I believe we're going to need to have some kind of file that is going to be suitable for this endeavor. So where do we start? How can we get this? So just so that everybody can follow along, I made a very simple version of a PDF file that we're going to be able to share with you later on our platform. But for now, we're going to be working with this super simple file that you can see here. It's super simple, so everybody will be able to tag along. It also has the files from 3ds Max, so I believe that everybody, even those that aren't really, let's say, acquainted with 3ds Max itself, will be able to pretty much trace it just like you would start with regular drawing. So let's go ahead and save this image so everybody will be able to see what we're dealing with. Just so we have the right approach here, I'm going to make sure that we copy this scene. By the way, did I already tell you that this scene, this whole setup is based on what our student has actually created for us? So the reality is that Veronica, she's our student, so this is a scene created by Veronica Vavro, and she is our student. So she started from absolute scratch, just like you guys will be today. But the whole joke here is that, well, she was able to produce this scene in less than 3 weeks and send it towards us for the checkup. We liked it so much that we decided that we're going to be using it for this webinar, and I think that everybody's going to enjoy it as well. So the first thing we're going to do is, well, ignore this element. I'm going to be using it so that we don't need to aim too much, but it's close to 0, so again, in a second, we're going to have a little bit of fun. And as I said, I respect your time, so we're not going to be going through each and every click. I'm going to show you the most important elements I would go for, and also make sure that you can follow along, but without really tracing absolutely everything. Hello from to Philippines, Mexico, or can you recommend any site for textures? I believe that if you type in AGRI Heaven, you're going to find a very nice website for that. So the first thing we're going to do is just drag and drop that file that I just shown you. So you're going to be able to do exactly the same thing with this floor plan. So let's go for it. In this case, what we need to do is read the dimensions of this image. I know that this is quite unprecedented, and I'm going to make sure to add all of the measurements for you later on, so it's going to be easier and a little bit better for you to follow. But let's see. So what we have here is 3,330 pixels, and we've got 2445. So let's just type it in at 3ds Max, and then we're going to try to rescale everything. So what I'm going to need is that file back, because I think I made a small mistake by renaming this from something that was not really audible for our needs. So 2445. Oops, I need to type them in and in reverse, so we're going to just go for that. As you can see, both of those images look a little bit apart. And whenever we want to scale something, I'm going to show you a nice trick later on. But for now, if you want to learn how to use the floor plans, please go ahead and make sure to visit our previous webinars. And I'm going to just give you, or let's say that video is going to tell you exactly what to do at that point. So we got our walls. How do we build walls out of what we've got? So I'm going to hide those because we're going to need them later. So hello from Vietnam, hello from Morocco. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us. You're welcome. Hello everyone from Uzbekistan. Okay, that's the first Uzbekistan person that I can see in our audience. So welcome. I'm really amazed that we reached so many of you. So guys, tell me, what brings you here? Do you work with 3ds Max? Do you intend to learn something? Is there any, let's say, hunger for extra knowledge with 3ds Max, or just playing along to have a little bit of a chat in the nice company? Okay, hello from Mexico, Lebanon, Georgia. Okay, now calm down, guys, calm down. Wow. Okay, that's cool. Now, no more. Where are you from? Now let's talk a little bit about 3ds Max and 3D. So the tools you're going to need is 3ds Max and Corona Renderer, because those are the two tools that we use in Viz Academy. So let's get started. Since we've got our PDF as our background, the first thing I'm going to do is just simply trace it. making sure that I'm not really going to go into it, because at this moment we are working with an image. So what's going to be quite important for you to know and understand whenever you will be dealing with your visuals is that not everything needs to be pixel perfect. I mean, yes, you need to use the proper dimensions, you need to use proper proportions, but for the most part, we're not going to go into all of those elements because sometimes it is just not worth your time. And today I'm going to be using techniques that can or are part of 3ds Max 2024 and 2023. I'm going to try to limit myself to 2023 the most because I think that not everybody has yet updated to the newest version, so I'm not going to be using the newest, best version of Booleans, but we might just go ahead and create something that you're going to really enjoy. Okay, so now you notice that I'm just tracing everything along. Why that is? Whenever you will be working with your floor plans, you're probably not going to need to trace everything like I did. But for the most projects, you're going to try to cut some corners. Whenever you do that, you don't need to, let's say, build the bathroom that's in this area. You don't need to build the kitchen. You don't need to do any additional elements that are not going to be part of the shot. We're saving a little bit of time, and you know, time is money. So in this case, we're going to start working in a little bit smarter way. There's a difference between working with pictures and with design. We're going to go over a design project at some moment, but this is going to be very similar to the process we're going to go through today, but there are some differences that I will be discussing in some other videos, although our students already know all of those changes, so we're just going to go ahead and continue. Okay, is there a new version for floor generator for 3ds Max 2024? I believe that version for 2023 works just fine with that 3ds Max, so you don't need to do anything other than that. If you haven't noticed what I did here, because there's a lot of white pixels, what I did here is by mistake I held my mouse and made a little bit of an arch, and this can happen, but don't panic, just continue. Make sure that you go back and fix it later. For example, we can select our vertices, right click and go for corner. That way it's going to, well, pretty much be a straight line. So from point A to point B, everything works just fine, and we could just fix it for the third one, but this is what I did here. So the reason why I also made sure to trace those parts that are going to be our windows is to save a little bit of time and not to connect objects that we don't need to. So this is going to be one of those things you're going to have to learn over time, and it really comes with experience. But to be honest, it all boils down to, am I going to add extra lines in this area? Then I'm going to add this vertex. Why did I do it this way? Well, because I really like to cut corners. When it comes to 3ds Max, I always make sure that I go through I always try to make sure that I go through the easiest possible solutions. Okay, so can you use your curses if we don't speak English very well? Thank you very much for this question. Yes, and we're constantly working on improving our videos and materials. We had students from Japan, China, we had students from Australia, from America, I mean the whole America, not only the USA. So right now we even have one of our staff members that lives in US. I'm pretty sure that Javier is from Mexico, but I cannot really tell, and don't quote me on that. So if you're listening and I was wrong, I'm so sorry, Javier. But anyway, we pretty much can accompany whole world. So Apart from that, if you can understand what I'm saying right now, and I'm trying in the videos, I try to make sure to use a simple, plain language and also show everything slowly, so there's no miscommunication. And even if you mute my videos, it is still going to be quite easy to follow, because I don't try to make any kind of surprise information. Sorry, I don't add any surprise information. Okay, we've got Jose from Mexico. Okay, any other questions? And what about Slovakia? We actually had Slovakian student. I believe that even right now, our current ongoing group has one person from Slovakia, so you are also welcome to join us if you wish to. Just so everybody knows where to find us and how to get to our website. If you want to see available dates and our current offer, go to Visacademy Co. UK. Click on available dates, and by the way, if you create your account, you're going to be able to dive into the freebies. We constantly update that part of our platform with some new textures, new models, and sometimes even videos that aren't posted on YouTube. But let's now continue. So guys, right now, what you probably seen is that I eyeballed my ceiling, and pretty much this wasn't the best idea here. I mean, it was, because we're going to quickly just try to steal it from the last file. Honestly, I'm going to just make sure that everything that we do is going to be beginner friendly. So right now, if you've noticed, I've had this line. It was a line that we had every corner was already welded. So in this case, my extrusion is going to go up like this. And you can see that the amount doesn't really play a role, because we're going to be manipulating everything. Did you upload PDF from AutoCAD? No, I changed this into a JPEG file during our webinar and in Photoshop. So it's going to be just a little bit simpler and not something that a typical well, without any info that is going to be confusing, so everybody, especially beginners, can tag along. Why don't import WG directly? Because some of your clients won't really have a file like this at their hands, and we're trying to prepare you for the easiest possible scenarios. The hardest scenarios with using the easiest methods. And a lot of times when you import files from AutoCAD, you're going to run into some issues that are really hard to solve. So that is why I prefer to even trace those on an image like this, because it doesn't take a lot of time and I don't have to fix everything. And whenever whenever you import a file like this, you're going to run into a huge problem when the designer was very sloppy. Your 3ds Max is going to tremendously slow down, because 3ds Max is not really the perfect software to create files that are going to be CAD friendly. So it handles it very well, but you know designers, they like to store stuff all around the scene. It's going to be a real nightmare to turn it to work with that in 3ds Max, so I just prefer to use the easiest method. But let's just try to suspend the disbelief and tag along, all right? Now, can we download this floor plan for practice? Yes, this is going to be available on our platform, so you will be able to also tag along. Or you can take a screenshot if you'd like to, but we're going to share it with you at some point on our platform. Just adding a little bit of weight to my walls. You can see that everything is just pretty much messed up. Why that is? Because shell modifier is actually super smart, and it's trying to take into account all of the angles and all of the elements of my model. So since we've got some kind of openings and different, pretty much weird angles, this means that it's trying to project the same normals. but in order to, well, help it be a little bit dumber, we're going to just click on straighten the corners, and we're going to try to just type in a value that's going to be suitable for you. Typically, walls are going to be approximately 60 centimeters thick, so that's what I'm going to try to go for. But it's always going to vary depending on the project. The reason why I try to do it this way is very simple. It's easier for me, and I'm not going to spend as much time just by going through those parts. Okay, I've forgotten that by removing all of the numbers from my file, I kind of forgotten where the ceiling was, but I believe it was closer to 350, so we're going to go with that. So 350 centimeters is going to be our top part. But are we going to stay, are we going to keep it this way? Because from time to time, we should actually look at our reference and what are we building. So we're building this scene, and what we have to remember about is that an image like this is going to be quite simple to trace, quite simple to build, but at the same time, we have to have the right proportions. We cannot just allow ourselves to add objects out of the blue and, well, all of them need to make sense. Okay, why not use File Link Manager to import CAD file and just unlink it after finishing the model? That's also a very good idea to do it, but remember, from 0 to hero, and this is a beginner-friendly video. So when it comes to linking, merging files, and adding all of the, let's say, extra steps that aren't really necessary, I prefer to skip them so everybody can tag along. And if we want to do this in a more office-friendly manner, we can go for that. But remember, we first need to learn how to walk before we run. And if we want to go into complicated design, we can go into scripts, but that's not beginner-friendly. So at this point, we're going to do it this way. Do you recommend to use Corona renderer over V-Ray? This is a recurring question, and thank you for that. I'm always going to say this. At first, the first time when Corona came out, I was absolutely I fell in love with that software. Why? Because in this case, suddenly 3D rendering made sense. I had predictable results, and one material that I created for scene A worked in scene B, and suddenly everything worked. You cannot even imagine how frustrating V-Ray was a few years ago, and honestly, I hated it. Every minute of working with V-Ray was just me struggling to get any kind of results that would look good, but lucky for us, Corona is there, and we can actually start working with it. Okay, so now again, we've got this polygon. I'm going to click 4 on my keyboard on the polygon. Once you select the polygon, you want to hold Control and double click. This is going to create this ring, and this is one of those elements that 3ds Max 2022 or 3 actually introduces, and we can just shift drag it to extrude it a little bit forward. What I do here, what I tried doing here is adding a little bit of extra, let's say, area for my ceiling in order to make it work a little bit better. So again, we're going to double click on one of the lines, for example, the middle line or the exterior line. So thanks to this, I can just go to my create shape from selection, and that's going to be the outline of my whole room. That's also going to be my ceiling. So select linear and just create this line. This line is going to be very helpful to us, but because of 3ds, the way 3ds Max operates, its pivot is going to be set to the box pivot. So in order to make this a little bit easier to work with, we're going to go to Effect Pivot Only, Center to the Object, and then we're going to go back to our Modify panel And in here, we're going to either select shell or other modifier that's going to be very helpful for us in this endeavor. Again, this is not really necessary because you might as well just create a box on top of the whole ceiling, but I found it to be a little bit more elegant and a little bit easier for me. I do the same for the bottom because you know that you should prefer to have your floor on 0, because most of the objects that are created in 3ds Max will be also created on 0. So for example, if I create a box, its starting point is going to be on grid and on 0. So we can change where the grid is, but we don't want to do that. We want to use the tools at hand. So we're just going to select the bottom, just like we did with the top. And we're going to just shift drag it, so it's going to have a little bit of extra space. Again, this is not every step here is necessary. I'm just going for a beginner-friendly version. We could cut many corners, but again, it's going to be a little bit more elegant for those of you that follow along. And this is going to build a nice habit of not making too messy scene. Okay, so this is going, you're going to like this one. Because our ceiling is going to go to the top, what we can do is change our outer outline into inner outline, and that's pretty much going to be our floor now. So what I'm going to do is set 0 for this object. So it's just going to be my floor object. And I hope that you're going to forgive me this one small element, but we're also going to now use a reference image as our background. So let's just make sure to jump into our viewport. That's going to be, for example, perspective. We're going to put this reference just so we can see everything really nicely. And we're going to try to trace some of the elements for this setup. So I have a pre-prepared camera, so it's going to be a little bit easier for me. And if I shift F, it's going to be just, well, in the right position. I need to make sure that the dimensions of my shot are going to be identical to those of the original. So we're going to get a little bit closer. I recommend using 1090 and 9920 by, in this case, 1339. Why do we do this kind of proportion? Just because that's the image that was produced by our student. This proportion is going to help us just navigate through the whole process. And you can see that this whole reference wasn't really necessary. I'm just setting this up so it's going to be easier. When it comes to the scene like this, because we already have everything ready, I'm going to be modeling all the elements. And if you ask any questions, please make sure to and do not hesitate, ask questions. This is why we're here. We're trying to build something beautiful. Please use 3ds Max and V-Ray. Nah, thanks, I'm not going to. Once I left V-Ray, I never went back. Reason, it's needlessly confusing. You cannot be an artist with V-Ray. You have to be an engineer to get any kind of nice results. And wasting time on that, no thank you. I'd rather be a little bit more creative than a nerd. I mean, I'm a huge nerd, but that's beside the point. Okay, excluding the basic modeling phases, how much creative part is there in your course? What about the composition of the images? That's a very nice question, and we cover those topics as well. We try to go through composition, we try to go through, well, basic modeling apart, right? We go to the composition, we analyze the images, we try to understand what references are, why the reference works and why it doesn't. Once you start working on your own image, you're going to quickly find out that it's not about the specifics. For example, this furniture piece or that can be substituted with something else, but the image and the whole idea works because of the composition, because of the colors, because of the lighting. And those topics are also covered during our training. This is pretty much week between the second and third week of our training. We focus mostly on that, but really the moment when we get into colors is week number 4, where we have the basics of materials and we can now experiment and be a little bit more creative And about the creativity, you decide what you're going to be creating, following our guidance, obviously, but you decide what you will be working on. If your style is futuristic or classic, whatever, you're going to be able to work with images that you're interested in, not something that's going to be cookie cut for every student along. So we pretty much give a lot of nice freedom to our students. Okay, from India, I'm your student, but not I'm your student, but not I want but. Thank you very much. It's nice to have you. Glad that you joined in, sir. Can we integrate Revit models with 3ds Max? Captain, yes, we can. And if you want to, you can visit our YouTube channel, which you're already on. And there's a pretty much a video on this very topic. I go into detail what to do with the models and where to really where to click. Okay, this is going to be a nice tip for all of you. So please make sure to take notes. How about we, since we've got thickness for our walls, I'm going to go for object properties and click on display as box. This way, my boxy ceiling is not going to be in my way. I could do the same for the walls, but we need the walls and we need to start creating our windows. So how about we do just that? Thanks to the fact that I pre-prepared some of the vertices prior, I don't need to create extra lines to create my windows. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this the easiest route. Shift and drag this polygon away. Then we're going to go for the other windows and we're just going to shift and drag. And you guessed it, shift and drag. If we want to add some kind of details in our walls, for example, I would like to have another line somewhere around here. You're going to notice that because of the geometry, the line on the back is going to be slightly skewed. But this is not going to have any impact on our rendering, so we might as well just manipulate this one vertex alone and leave the other one without really touching it. But if we really want to make this absolutely straight, we can press on Make Planner, next to Make Planner, and click on Y-axis, where you're going to just straighten this object. But you can also use regular scaling, which is going to require you 2 more clicks. But it all depends on what you prefer. So now, listening to my own advice, I'm just going to drag and create this one element, so it's going to be more or less in position where I need it. So that's going to come into play a little bit later on. So now, since we've created most of our building or most important parts of it, it's time to start adding some kind of furniture or just some kind of details before we really build it. So you never want to start rendering. By the way, all the model is here. Let's read some of the measurements then. So we've got our windows. So I've got the wrong measurements again. So please bear with me. We're going to fix it in a second. In this case, I'm going to make sure to lower some of the elements so it's a little bit easier for me to set up everything. So, okay, let's go. You know what? I'm just going to delete this part and we're just going to delete this part, the old part, and we're just going to focus on our model because it's ours and it's going to be better. So now let's just follow along with our floor plan. So since we've got our windows, we need to get some measurements where the windows are supposed to be. So the model is, the original model is very simple and very similar to what we are going to make. But I need the measurements that I deleted from our PDF. So it's 60 centimeters for this window, and the top of this window is approximately at 3 meters height. So we're going to use those measurements for our needs. And when it comes to this window, it pretty much follows the same logic. It's 300 centimeters and it's closer to the ground. It's a little bit higher, but it's pretty much something that we can just ignore and put even lower as long as we've got our floor. Okay. Hello from Brazil. Your work is impactable. You are very good. Okay, congratulations to me then. Thank you very much, Jan. That's really nice of you. So Max or Blender? 3ds Max. Why I chose 3ds Max over Blender? I believe that Blender, although is great, and I have nothing against this software, it doesn't feel very professional yet. It has a lot of, let's say, goofy elements in the UI. It's a little bit confusing, and honestly, I never found any kind of, let's say, tutorials that would suffice my hunger for knowledge. I always run into some problems, and it's always almost good. It's always almost good. 3ds Max doesn't have that. 3ds Max is pretty much always just good, and you can work more accurately with most of the work that you're going to be doing. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Blender is bad. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying that Blender is actually a great software. So let's go. Okay. I made those small mistakes in the beginning, so we're just going to correct those and move those elements closer to one another, so everything is going to have the right proportion, and we're back at it. So let's continue, and let's just jump to a different viewport. And now what we're going to do is start adding the furniture. So the furniture isn't really going to be visible that much in this case. So let's clear this out. Actually, I hate this having this background right now. So background, let's synchronize, apply to the active view, and we no longer have that problem. So where do we start? We want to block out all of our furniture, and we want to make sure that we're going to be able to work with the right height of the ceiling. So right now, the ceiling, we can see it on our reference, is going to have multiple levels. And I want to show you those levels by opening the reference yet again. So this time we're not going to be putting it in our viewport. So how do we do this type of cutout in such a complicated model as ours? There are plenty options that we can explore, but we're obviously going to go for the easiest one, and we're going to make sure that, well, it works for us and not vice versa. So let's go ahead and add those details into our scene. First, let's just read it from our main file. So that's going to be it. Here we need to make sure to prepare our ceiling for this kind of cutout. So what I like to do, and this is something that I found to be the easiest and fastest way of creating ceilings like that, is to select my main object properties, and we're just going to change it into, well, something that we can see. Now we're going to copy this same object, and since this is going to be the exact copy, now we can apply some changes to it. So for example, one of the changes I can do is add a rectangle in the middle of it. So this could be just tracing the main file, but I'm going to make sure to just go ahead and apply this by connecting both of those objects. You can see that, well, they are quite far apart. So what we're going to do is make sure that we scale everything flat. If I'm going to scale it this way, it's not going to work. That's because we need to change the pivot center, and we need to make sure that we can work with the group. So if we change it to group, we're going to be able to move both objects. This is something that not a lot of people actually know, that 3ds Max allows you to work with, let's say, work pivot, your object pivot, group pivot. This is really powerful because it speeds up our process. So now you can see that now with this cutout, I'm going to be able to add some detail to my ceiling, but I still need to place it in the right position. So long story short, we're going to lower it up until we're going to be satisfied with the new detail that we created. Looking at it, it's going to be in the right position, but I need to make sure that I also align it to my floor plan. So I'm just going to do that. So let's go for spline. Let's move it along, and this is going to be the opening for this whole part. But remember that in this area, we're also going to have a huge piece of furniture, so we have to accommodate for that as well. Because we also want to leave some space for this part, we could add just a texture for it, but we can do a quick trick, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Hello from Albania. What processor, CPU, and graphics card (GPU) do you recommend? I can't really recommend you anything. I can really give you info on what I have in my computer. But anything that's going to be Ryzen 9 or let's say processor that's i7, i3 or i5, depending on really what you're going to be using your laptop for or your computer. If it's just going to be for 3ds Max, I would actually recommend going for a desktop because sometimes it is going to be just a little bit more responsive with your work, and you're going to get a bit higher numbers for the same price. So what I'm doing is I'm creating the openings for those elements that are going to be part of our whole endeavor. So again, we're just going to move on, and now we're going to, our ceiling is done. Okay, I've actually didn't copy this part, so I need to go back and just copy it, make it a little bit shorter, and we're just going to make that a little bit closer. Remember that this is beginner friendly video, so we're going to do some of the things that you probably wouldn't even think are the best solutions, but trust me, this is all going to turn out just perfect. So now, since we've got most of the walls, we need to do the opening for our for this small part. So I'm just going to scale this window down and also scale, extrude it inwards so that I do not cut through the wall, just a little bit inside. So how about this height? So typical height for a sink is going to be probably around 80 centimeters, depending on your height. So we're just going to go a little bit lower to give it a bit of area. I'm not going to care about this height, just we're going to eyeball it and we're going to continue. Now, looking again at our main model, what we can see here is that, well, we've got a few things that we have to do. How about making this type of grid? Because just copying boxes is going to take us a while. How about we use one of the scripts that are part of 3ds Max? Okay, scripts, right? That sounds very scary. Do we want to use floor generator? In this case, we could, and it's going to save us time, but beginner friendly. So we're going to go for array modifier instead. So what I'm going to need here is 2 levels. First, it's the level of the ceiling, and then with this level for those planks. So how do we first create our, let's say, the area for the planks? What I'm going to do is I'm going to add the edge modifier, editable poly modifier on top of my shell, so I can just grab one of the parts inside, so I don't need to get any extra measurements or any extra details. Now we're just going to go ahead and click on detach, but as a clone. So in here, we're going to go for settings, detach as a clone. And here we can click OK and just go ahead with that. So this is going to be our starting point. Again, I'm going to use a shell because that's really one of my favorite modifiers. And look at that, we just made this super simple. Okay, now reusing parts is something I'm really a fan of. So we're just going to right click, go for copy, clone, and we're going to clone this object. Why are we cloning it the way we are? Because I want to create a few planks that are going to just simply fill in this space, but those are going to be slightly shorter. So we're just going to make sure to edit this and go a little bit higher. So we're on the ceiling still, but we're going to make this happen in a second. So now we're going to go for array modifier, and we're just going to try to make it work for us. Again, you can see that by default, array is going to go on the x-axis and is going to go right side. And that's normal, but what we really need here is a little bit more. So we need to change the count, but we also need to change the offset. So for that, I'm going to add a little bit more offset. So something around 16 or minus 15 is going to be fine. And we're just going to increase the number of those copies up until we're satisfied. I believe that this is going to be enough for me. I could also get rid of this copy by simply moving this element away, but honestly, what's the point? Nobody's going to see it, and we're not being sloppy, we're just saving a little bit of time. So now we created this first part for our grid. again, beginner friendly, so there are many methods we could use instead, but this one is going to be just the simplest one. Again, we're going to go back to our element. Let's change its color. So this element, now we're going to select it again, right click and clone it. So it's going to be just easier for us to work with this clone. And now we're going to do exactly the same thing, but we're going to delete all the other walls, but the one we have here. So we still have the shell, so shell works for us. Now we're going to add the array modifier, and array is going to do this trick. Well, that's not what we're looking for. So we're going to change our count to 1, and we're going to go to for the y-axis instead. Tutorial idea: how to create an interior using a mobile phone lidar scan in Polycam. You know what? That's not a bad idea. It's very complicated, but it's not going to be the worst. So 16 centimeters, I'm just being lucky today with those centimeters. So I'm just going to try to mess this up a little bit. Let's go for a smaller number and actually go for something around 15 something. So 15.9. Okay, I think that we're going to go one copy less, and we've got pretty grid in here. So now, considering the trick we did in this area, we probably can do the same for the other part, right? Yes, but we're going to save a little bit of time. How? We're just going to copy this element. Now we're going to go to our object properties, and I can go for a little bit smaller number, for example, just 11 or 12, and go ahead and change the offset to something very small. So in this case, I believe that this is going to be fine for us. Remember, we could use a floor generator, we could use some scripts, we could use a lot of different techniques. But because it is beginner friendly, I really want to make sure that everybody's going to be able to tag along. And so far, you're going to need just the base knowledge of 3ds Max, but base is just, you know what, how to click in 3ds Max, and that's all. So now we've got our grid, and this is going to be just just a detail for the interior, so we don't need to go into too much of it. So hello and hi. So now we're going to copy this and just place it in the second opening that we've got. Just a tip for you guys: don't make everything absolutely perfectly fitting for every element ever. You want to have a little bit of messed up elements, some jagged edges, because that improves the realism of your shot. So if something is not going to be aligned perfectly, snapped to one another, that's fine, because it's well, it's going to make your shot more believable. So here I just noticed that this one part was a little bit too tall. I'm going to change this, and we're just going to edit this so it's going to be a little bit easier for me to align, and it's going to create this illusion that one is a little bit well, they are intertwined, so we don't want them to be exactly the same size. We don't want them to be at the same level. We want them to be slightly different. And now this is starting to look more convincing, right? We're getting there. We're getting there. So let's well, hold on. We're soon going to be at the right spot. So now let's try to create a little bit something in this area where well. Let's create some of the furniture. So now the ceiling is done in this scene. So let's just go ahead and try to copy this whole counter. So just as I said, to respect your time, I'm not going to go through each and every piece of modeling, because sometimes just adding boxes is not going to be good. It's just going to be a waste of your time. So we're just going to hide some of the elements, and we're going to analyze what's going on here. So first of all, we've got our rectangles, and that's pretty much going to be boxy elements. But we also have a little bit of detail in our furniture. So how do we add this type of detail? The easiest and simplest way of adding the detail is to make sure to use booleans. Boolean is the easiest way of adding detail to any furniture piece or any model. So we're going to do a bit of cheating now. I'm going to copy parts of it, and we're going to talk a little bit about this corner, how to create that part, and how to create this fridge, how to make this from zero to make it look good, and what details should we be caring about. But for this part, I'm just going to copy it because those are just boxes. But let's create this part, right? So how do we do it? Okay, now we're going to go to our 3ds Max, and I'm going to show you that one piece of furniture. By the way, the files that we're going to give you are going to have a little bit more detail, so you're not going to have to cut corners. You're going to be able to build everything on your own. So height, let's make sure that this is going to make some sense. So length 60, 70, let's go for 2 centimeters, and that's it. Now let's have a little bit of fun with details. Okay, let's just go ahead and rotate it because we can. And now convert this to editable poly. And I'm going to show you a neat trick, but we might as well just use booleans instead. So what you can do in 3ds Max is you can create shapes on objects, and then thanks to the newest methods of modeling, you can add a little bit of details. How do we add objects into 3ds Max? Is it like in Archicad, drag and drop? Exactly. That's exactly how you can do it. I'm actually going to show you some of those elements right now because Corona is genius, and it comes with something called Chaos Cosmos. Chaos Cosmos is a bigger part of the whole journey. So as Corona joined forces with Chaos, Chaos is the mother company for V-Ray. This is also going to be available for those of you that use Enscape and V-Ray. But beside the point, you're going to be able to look into this huge repository of 3D models. And by huge, I mean 3,000 something strong library, and it's getting bigger. So what we can do is just go for downloaded objects, click on add the model, and it's going to just, well, spawn in your scene. Then, thanks to the fact that those models are going to be neatly done, we can use this option called select and place and just move the objects to select and place them on the other elements, and that's going to be the end of the story. So how can we, okay, Uzbekistan, and guys, by the way, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them. If you want me to dive into some kind of topic, go ahead and just share what you would like to hear about. Now, to add that detail, we need to make sure that we work with a nicer object. So that in this case, it's a simple box. I want to create a circle on its surface. So in order to do that, I'm going to click on AutoGrid. AutoGrid is going to be a bit of, let's say, nuisance if we're going to put our object below 0. So we're just going to put it here. Now let's go for a circle, AutoGrid, and we want to create this on the surface of our object. That's going to be super fast and easy. Now what we can do is just convert this object to editable spline. And thanks to the newer options in 3ds Max, we can just shift and drag it, and that's it. Again, we can just scale it down or up if we want to, if we need to. That's going to be all up to you if you want to or where you want to add the detail. How to make a proper library of models, interior and exterior, and texture would not be missed while we move models category-wise. So there's absolutely no way of making this kind of library that's going to be bulletproof at every step. But what you can do is set your, let's say, objects textures in a separate folder. So the 3ds Max file is going to be, let's say, immune to movement for your files. What I did some time ago is I made sure to go to my computer, and whenever I was in this desktop, I've actually used, yeah, this work, right, red. So I used to change the hard drive number to, sorry, a letter to something specific, because nobody is going to get to the X drive. So in order to be able to, let's say, move files from my drive X to somebody else's computer, we just made sure that this is going to be an easier solution. So again, we're just going to go to a double poly, select this object. And this is the funny part, because normally you would have to, let's say, go to compound objects and go for all of the dynamics, compound objects. You would have to go to for Pro Cutter and just add this element in. I don't think it's necessary right now, because all we need to do is attach this part. As long as it's let's say finished shape, what we can do now is shift drag it inside, and look at that, automatically created with nearly perfect topology, in the sense that it's going to be chamfer friendly and it's not going to give us any kind of trouble. So it's super fast, easy, and well, I really like the new non-nonsense approach, where everything is just smooth, simple, and fast. So you don't have to care about too much elements that won't really matter for your scene. So for example, a detail like this can be done with just a simple trick. So you draw some kind of object, you place it in the right position, and you just shift drag it. So once again, just because it was so quick that some of you might have missed it, what we can do is go back, have our editable poly, move this one shape wherever we want it, and just apply attach to our object. As long as it's a closed spline, what we can do is just select this one part, and it really doesn't matter how many of those elements we're going to have here. So let's just create a copy, and let's make it a little bit harder for 3ds Max to test it. So yes and yes. And it's perfectly cut. So it's going to be super easy to model. And no, you don't have to care about topology as much as we used to, because 3ds Max evolved and now they're putting a little bit less emphasis on modeling for all of those elements. So looking at this scene, you can see that all of the furniture in here is pretty much just a box, a quick chamfer or some other option, and a ready object or just a spline to fake that we've got a faucet. Some of those elements are actually made during our training. So those elements are pretty much, I'm going to take the liberty and copy it into our main scene to make sure that this is going to be something easier. Any plans to do more videos like this on one in the future? I mean, 0 to hero, but with different scenes. Pedro, thank you for this question. Yes, we're going to be doing exteriors, we're going to be doing interiors, and I'm planning on making some kind of product shot videos. So it's going to be a little bit easier for those of you that come for, well, this specific type of work. So a lot of you work for companies that produce stuff, and you cannot even imagine how many of my students work for door companies. This is a recurring theme. Door companies, window companies, or companies that create kitchens, especially kitchens. So those three things are going to be just super easy. So let's copy this part and paste it into our main scene. Yes, I'm cutting corners, but we're trying to save a little bit of time because we're already an hour into it, and going through all of the details, we would have to really spend 3 hours here. We can, I don't mind it, but at some point we're going to have to say enough is enough, and we're just going to try to add one furniture piece at a time. Just imagine that we're adding ready models, because we can download them or we can add them from Chaos Cosmos, so it's pretty much going to be the same thing. But as I mentioned, we're going to go over some of the elements, and we're going to try to go through the most important elements of the furniture inside of both scenes. So How about we now talk a little bit about this counter and how it was made. So there are some elements that we're going to be copying as well, but let's just make sure that we grabbed everything that we need, and we're going to analyze how it was made and not exactly model every piece of geometry here, although we could just do the boxes. Hello, that's Vignesh. Sometimes I have a little bit of trouble pronouncing your names, so if I'm going to read your name wrong, please forgive me. I'm trying my best, but you all have very interesting names, and it's really hard to know the proper pronunciation for everything. But at least I know the proper pronunciation for 3ds Max tools, and that's going to be probably quite helpful. Use scene material, so I'm copying objects from my main scene to this scene, and some of the files were already there. So let's make sure to talk about this edge and how to make it on this edge and how we can handle it. So this object, again, is super simple. The super simple word is, I'm going to say super simple a lot, probably. So again, it's just boxes without any kind of details, and we can also see that in order to have a little bit of extra detail there, we've added chamfer, and you can see that one has UVW mapping, which is cool, but also we've got the chamfer. So let's go ahead and delete this, delete that, and we're just going to remake this one part, and we're going to add this nice rounded up edge. Point of view, when okay, thank you. I wasn't expecting that, Mikasa, but thank you very much. I am getting red probably. You made me blush. Anyway, thank you very much. That's the first one. Anyway, let's continue. So we've got our box, and you know what? It's a box, so we can just recreate it. But we've got this top box that already has a baked-in version of the modifier that I mentioned, so the chamfer. So what we can do is delete it and copy this part, and just simply do all the things we already did. So we're just going to try to select it, copy as object, and on top of that, I'm going to add a little bit of shell. So in this case, we're just going to add a bit more, so it fits the counter on the other side. So those two parts can be attached, and that's exactly what I'm going to do because it's easier for me to work with this. And since I want to add that nice rounded up edge, I'm going to make sure to select this part here and literally just ignore any kind of idea of topology, because 3ds Max is evolving, and what I mean is everything is slowly getting into this field where topology doesn't matter that much. We're going to have automated options quite soon that will retopologize everything, and for ArtViz we really need to make sure that everything first of all looks well. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of chamfer. Make sure that it's a nice rich chamfer with a lot of elements. So let's continue. Corona only, okay. Which website you are using to download 3D models and textures? So I scatter the internet. I mostly go for websites that are, let's say, more or less known, or I would say in a sense that are recognizable. One thing that is unfortunately very common in 3D world, and I am a big let's say opponent of that, is borrowing 3D models from other people. I don't like doing this. I prefer to buy my 3D models. I prefer to make sure that job well done is going to be appreciated. And the reason for it is, we're part of this industry. If we want this industry to grow, to prosper, we need to make sure that we're going to respect one another and pretty much, respect everybody's work. So websites that I use, for example, is TurboSquid, Dimenshiva. I also use websites like CG Trader, and from time to time, I make sure to also visit 3D Sky. but not as often usually right now, because that's not the point of that. While I was talking, you probably noticed that I used chamfer a lot. The reason why we add chamfers to furniture pieces like this is very simple. We want to make sure that everything we're going to be doing, and once we render this, we're going to have that nice extra edge to grab a little bit of that reflection. Typically, you want to make sure that the reflection is going to be there and that it's going to be a part of your whole, let's say, appeal. So in this case, we're just going to make sure to go ahead and simply, well, add that rounded up edge. Again, we're going to hide some of the parts of our ceiling, and this can get nauseating real quick. So in order to save ourselves a little bit of our clicks, we're going to make sure to select the whole ceiling, deselect what we don't need, and I'm going to make sure to group all of those objects as I go. So this way, now when I'm going to be selecting my ceiling, it's going to be non-attached, but simply it's going to be easier for me to work this way. Also, what I recommend using is a layer explorer. By default, it's going to be docked here on the bottom, so we can also dock it by right-clicking and go to right. But I don't like it. I don't like it here. I always take it away and just allow it to float or dock it on the left. So it's going to be a little bit easier for us to work with all of those elements. So again, it all depends on what we want to do. So, okay. Second. Oh, my 3ds Max froze. Thank you very much. So 1 second, I need to try to work with that. Okay. Still nothing. Okay, we're back, and now it's working. So thanks to 3ds Max, well, for that a small stress-inducing moment. So renderable, yes, but we want to go for display as box, and now everything is going to be easy to see through. So pretty much that's it. Okay, we got that huge element at the back, right? So how do we do that? How do we model something like this? Again, it's a nice piece of furniture, but I think it's going to be a little bit easier for us if we just try to copy it instead, because, okay, we can go for the boxes, but this is going to be something that typically you're going to already know how it's going to look like, where you're going with your scene. So unhide all, and let's just copy what we've got here. I can go through this process with you if you want to, because that's what why you're here. So I'm going to examine the model. Because this model is made to only look good and to feel good for rendering time, I made sure that we remake it in the simplest possible manner. So again, those are boxes on top of boxes. In the file that I'm going to be sharing with you later on, I'm going to give you the whole measurements, and this is going to have its own view. So you're going to be able to build this furniture piece real quick, because again, it's more about just showing you the process instead of just modeling the boxes. So let's go to our copy and copy this element. Okay. What do you think about Lumion for exterior render? Actually, Lumion saving saves a lot of time. I need your opinion. Lumion is a very powerful software. I love it because it really allows me to go through ideas really quick. But I don't use it that often because I really put the emphasis on quality. And when it comes to quality of rendering, unfortunately, Lumion is not yet there. It's really great. It's fast. But if you want to have the same quality pixel for pixel, unfortunately, it is going to take as much time or even longer than Corona. So I stick to Corona anyway. Okay. How do you make video animations in 3ds Max? That's a nice question, and we're going to also be able to answer that. But right now, from what I'm seeing, is that we're probably going to have to create part 2 of this video, because we already took a little bit longer than I anticipated, and I'm starting to copy more objects than I originally planned. So auto rename the elements. So auto rename. Okay, and copy to is a script. Yes, it is, but that's okay, that's cheating from my part. But as I said, I'm going to be cutting a few corners. So copy to is a script that you can get from the internet. I don't remember the original site where I got it, but I believe it was absolutely for free on 3D Sky. And you can look for this specific script there. So, okay, we cut a few corners. And honestly, going through this whole modeling part would be time consuming. So we're just going to, as I said, cut corners. About this fridge, you can see that it's the simplest object ever. It's just boxes and insets. So the only part that's really interesting here is this part. So what we did here with the student is, you guessed it, used the perspective and the boxes to just play along and create something that's going to be similar. So just simple, just a simple quick modeling session for a box. Let's create a box. Extrude it slightly. It all depends on your references. Remember that when working with 3D, you want to make sure that you go, you're going towards some goal. So if your goal is to just create a nice image, that's going to be slightly easier to just use some already made elements in order to, be able to just create something simple and fast. So again, I'm clicking on one polygon, double clicking, and now I've got this ring selected. So what I'm going to do at this point is add a little bit of extrusion. So extrusion, but right click on it, and then we're going to change it into normal and just simply change it a little bit more. So it's going to be smaller. At this point, all I need to do is scale this part a little bit further. So it's going to be inside even more, and then shift drag it inside. And on top of everything, I'm going to apply the chamfer modifier. So it's going to look like we really spent a lot of time on creating this very complicated fridge, but in reality, we just cut corners. So again, it looks nice. If you have this problem, and a lot of times you will, you can see that this object on the left has a very nice edgy, or let's say slim look, while mine is kind of goofy. So this goofy part is just the smoothing groups acting up. Remember to always make sure to go to your chamfer modifier properties. Wait a second. Chamfer modifier properties, and go to the output at the very bottom of this modifier. So in this case, you're going to have to scroll down and click on the smoothing groups and either go to chamfers only, so it's going to chamfer those elements, or if the number of segments is going to be big enough, you don't need to even smooth it out, because 3ds Max is pretty much going to handle it for you, and everything is going to be nice and beautiful, because those reflections are still going to be visible. 3ds Max versus SketchUp, what is more preferable? I would say that 3ds Max is definitely more preferable. Why? Because it handles a way bigger amount of, let's say, files. So in this case, when it comes to formats, it really munches on those. When it comes to modeling, it has a lot of options and scripts that will help you just go through the hardest of models possible. A lot of games, videos, movies, and pretty much every big company works with 3ds Max right now. So SketchUp is good, but just as the name suggests, it's good for sketching. Although I know few artists that are absolutely amazing in the field of 3ds Max and SketchUp, but SketchUp alone is not going to handle everything, especially that SketchUp has a bit of a big problem. That problem is really going to be which version of 3ds Max do you use? I use 3ds Max 2023, but I also use 2024 for a little bit more complicated modeling, because it's faster, easier, and I like it more. Okay, so we've got most of our furniture. To speed up the process, because we're copying elements anyway, we're just going to move on to our previous scene. Allow me to just open it up. And in this case, how about we just skip the modeling part, because we modeled absolutely everything that was hard in this scene. So if you have any questions about elements, oh, by the way, one element that I should probably mention, because the ceiling is done. But when it comes to windows, what I do for my windows for quite some time, I either create them from scratch or I just download them. So window, you go for any kind of window that you have in this library, and in this case this one works for the most of my projects. But by default, what you're going to get is you're going to get a very nice model, but it's going to be in Corona proxy format. What does it mean? It means that this file is stored outside of your scene, speeding up how your scene performs and pretty much making it more responsible. So again, can we edit this? We can scale it, we can do some stuff to it, but in reality, it's going to ignore most of the modifiers. In order to take away this immunity, we're going to go ahead and right-click, go to mesh, convert to editable mesh, or we can just duplicate this object into our mesh if we want to, but that's going to just create a copy. So we're going to go to convert to editable poly, and now what's going to be possible is that we can just go ahead and convert this to whatever size and whatever measurements we want. And a lot of times when placing windows and other details like this, you don't want to be pixel perfect. You want to leave a little bit of space for the imperfections, because that's going to make your shot a little bit more believable. If something is going to be slightly overscaled or a little bit different proportion that it's originally supposed to be, it's okay, and nobody is going to notice it. And in most of the cases, you want to make sure that you will be efficient, especially during live webinars, because otherwise you're going to get into trouble, because people will start probably getting a little bit confused if you're going to do too much and too fast. So adding windows to a scene like this can be absolute piece of cake. So, okay, but Mike, what if I need to have 4 windows in this opening? Well, that's very simple. My favorite trick is using symmetry modifier as a copy tool. So we can just symmetry on the X mirror in this case and just add one more glass, piece of glass like this, or just copy through this element and just simply have 4, 3, or even 1 element of our window, because this pretty much slices and dices our objects real quick. So if you need 4 elements only, that's going to be your go-to method. And once you have the modifier on top of a modifier, don't worry, it's still going to work, because 3ds Max allows us for a lot of creativity. So as you can see, modeling in 3ds Max can be very nonsense-free, because not only you're able to edit elements, you're also able to import them real quick. But what's going to be the best part about this is cutting corners. So pre-mades, when it comes to, for example, SketchUp, Lumion, or whatever software, unfortunately, there's not a lot of them. 3ds Max is the most popular software out there, and for that reason, there's the biggest library ever for 3ds Max format. So although you can re-import some of the stuff into other scenes, it is more than likely that you're not going to be able to do the same trick in SketchUp, because you're going to have to go through hoops and loops and optimize a lot of elements in order to see something that's going to be useful. Hello, answer. Is it i2 software available for 3ds Max 2023? Yes, it is, and you should try it out, because there's a lot of very interesting options that you might find useful. For example, Forest Pack is a very nice tool that will allow you to quickly build well, using the presets that it has, it will allow you to quickly build large portions of forests, or, well, like the name suggests, or some kind of lawns. But I don't use it because I prefer to use Corona built-in option, which is Corona Scatter, and it also has a lot of presets there, so I use it instead. I mean, the presets are part of Chaos Cosmos, so I use those instead. Is there some kind of useful manager for 3ds Max files? So honestly, yes, there are file manager. Thank you for that question, Stas. There are file managers. For example, relink bitmaps. There are files that there are. Let's say there is software that will help you be a little bit faster with relinking those elements and using like your libraries. And there are options that are built in 3ds Max. If I recall correctly, there's an I don't use it that often, but it's scene converter. Oh, wait a second. Okay, I'm not going to be guessing where that is because I don't remember, but there's an option to just create your own libraries in 3ds Max, but honestly, nobody uses it, and me included, because honestly, it's not exactly what I would be expecting, and putting all the stuff in there is not exactly the easiest. So Connector, for example, is one of those programs. But going back to our main scene, so as I said, we're going to cut corners, so let's move on to our lighting. The CAD file that we're going to be sharing with you is probably going to be the most important and pretty much the most useful for all of you. So let's just imagine, let's pretend that we created every piece of geometry in here, but honestly, you know that copying all of those elements was the only approach here that we should have gone for, because it's just a little bit easier. I believe that I also need to reopen this file real quick, because otherwise we're not going to see. I already deleted some of the parts, so let's wait for it to open. Meanwhile, let's quickly try to model our sink. So how to make a sink that's going to be rectangular and well, it's going to fit perfectly into this hole. Well, we're going to select this one polygon, so it's already measured. We're going to go for detach, detach as clone, and now we have a new polygon that's going to be outside of our editable poly of this object. So what we can do is simply select it once we find it. If we're going to click into one position in 3ds Max, it's going to cycle through the objects that are in line. So for example, if I'm going to click on keep on clicking in one position, what you're going to notice is that I've actually eventually got to the object that I've just created without really going through some kind of elaborate loops. Hello from Nepal, midnight here. Really nice to see that you decided to lose a little bit of sleep to watch our webinar. How's the situation with 3ds Max in Nepal? I never really had a student from that place, but well, maybe someday. Can you do some classic stair modeling tutorial? Yeah, why not? If you have some suggestions, go ahead and send that to our email, or you can send a link. I don't know if chat here really allows us to open links, but if you can, just go for it. What about modeling the logo? Oh, we're going to go for that in a second. Thank you. So it's going to be easy, but everything in 3ds Max can be easy if we have the right approach. So because I want to make sure that we're going to have the same easy approach as in here, we're just going to go for nice round corners. And you guessed it, we're going to go for shell. Shell is absolutely my favorite for quick modeling and prototyping objects. When it comes to detail, you don't need to add any. So we're just going to go ahead and add chamfer on top of everything and lower the settings. Again, we're going to remember about chamfer edges, and voila, we just created a perfect sink that fits our walls. So meanwhile, we have opened our scene, so we're going to dive into our rendering and about modeling the logo. So first of all, it's a spline. Yes, it's a simple spline that you can draw on with 3ds Max. So let's go for a quick opening. So here we're going to just grab it here. So in this case, what we need to do in order to copy a logo like this, we could use splines that are going to be provided by our client, or we can recreate our own. But it's simpler than you think. So first, we're going to either go for any shape that you want. So we can just draw something. And in this case, it was a simple circle. Convert to a double spline and just go ahead and add a little bit of scaling. Then another scaling in this case. So we're just going to go for that, and we can remove the top part and start with shift drag. So it's going to be easier for us to connect those two parts. And we just created a very nice 3D appearance for this part. It looks like one object cuts from another. So we're just going to attach those two parts. So again, we're going to go for geometry, weld those two vertices so it's easier for us. Do we always need to chamfer our boxes? Thank you for that question, Valeria. Not always, but I do it for those extra reflections. So looking at our references yet again, we're going to see that if we don't add it, it's going to be a bit boring. But here, if we have a little bit of chamfers, you're going to notice that some of the edges are going to gain a little bit of that reflection in the corners. This is not really something that you have to go for, but an object that doesn't have those reflections is going to be infinitely more unrealistic than the one that has it. You can see that this object has beautiful reflections. It gathers all of those shiny elements, and it's very simple. But you don't need to add chamfers to your models because for the most part, chamfer is going to be simply a little bit too hard to add for some objects, especially if they were not modeled perfectly. So sometimes in order to, okay, so we've got the basis for our logo and we pretty much have this shape. So we pretty much need to just spline draw whatever we like. But since this logo also has some kind of text next to it, we can go for either 3ds Max text, the default version, or the one that was used here. So it's the Max Text Supreme, I would say. So Text Plus, because 3ds Max has a very nasty way of adding let's say, changes to their own products. They leave the old one because there's some kind of ancient code in 3ds Max that is more than 20 years old and nobody can touch it. So they cannot remove old files. They can only build on top of current objects or current build. So that's why 3ds Max gets a little bit clogged, but they are reverse engineering the code right now so that it's going to be a little bit more useful. So Mike, now let's go for Mike, and now we've got our nice restaurant because we just need to go for the right font, select it, and once we have the right font in our for us to use, we just need to, let's select this text. Okay, that was render. You may know render from previous webinars, but render is, well, my dog, and he reminds me that the webinar is a little bit longer than we anticipated. So that's why he's there. Hello, sir. Hello to Syria. Nice to see you, and thank you very much for joining in. So logos are super simple, and if we want to, we can use any font that is built in built in your Windows, or you can just use any kind of font that's going to be part of your scene. So pretty simple, pretty cool, because as I said, it works with all the fonts that you have installed in your Windows. So yes, it allows you to do some nice stuff in your shot. Bangladesh at 12 a.m. Nice. Guys, go to sleep. I mean, no, stay with us. I really enjoy your company. But regardless, you want to probably grab a little bit of sleep this night. So the cut corner version, we already added the plants, we already added the small pots. Modeling those objects is super simple. Again, it's a sphere or a cylinder with a little bit of something in it, and we've got all the bigger parts. But now it's time to start rendering. So how about we first go to the white render, and we're going to click on Start Interactive and see what we've got so far. So our whole scene is quite nice. We still need to add a little bit of extras into it in order to make it absolutely fantastic and bombastic. So this is the, let's say, older version. how about we check how our version compares to the original. We copied a few parts here and there, so it shouldn't be that much different. Let's go for material override in our render setup, go to physical rendering, and now we're going to go for single map. In this case, what we're going to be doing, what we're going to be using for our lighting is a specially designed HDRI by Viz Academy. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to share this one with you, but we're going to give you a few nice options later on. So let's go ahead and add the same type of HDRI into our scene. So material editor, and you typically want to use HDRIs for your lighting for interiors. Although Corona Sky and Sun are very powerful, I prefer using Corona bitmaps with nice HDRI instead, because in this case, it just gives me a little bit more options. Okay, so wait a second. We're going to have to do a little bit of a redo here. So one second. It seems like my 3ds Max decided that I actually don't have this file in the direction that I copied. So we're going to go to file location. Okay, I've got it. And now I've moved it into a different slot. So sorry for that. Now we're going to add it here, open it up, and that's the same texture or same map that my students got during our training. So if anybody in our audience is watching, yes, you've got this file already. Now we're going to connect it to our Corona color correction because we might need to add some kind of changes, for example, for saturation for a little bit better effect. Now I'm going to drag and drop this into my single map, and that's going to be inside. Again, we're going to try to add a little bit of rotation. So that rotation is going to be in that file. It was 433. So we're going to try to do the same, but without the extra spin. So let's go. Now this compares pretty neat to the original, right? So let's go ahead and add a little bit of more power to our HDRI. I'm going to be touching our tone mapping because, again, beginner friendly. So we're going to make sure that everything is going to be nice and easy. So output amount, let's go for this, a bit of extra output. So it's going to be stronger. And for the ceiling portion, is there any easy method there without using an array option? Yes, there are many options that are easier. For example, floor generator, or one of the options that we already talked about in the previous webinars, for example, Corona pattern. But for the ceiling, the easiest way of doing it would be actually using a floor generator. I'm going to show you how to do it using floor generator real quick. So you can just, use the other method if you want to. We go for floor generator, okay. We type in the values that we are interested in. So in my case, I'm going to leave this max length. Minimum offset is going to be set to 0. I want to go for minimum width, something around 3 centimeters. So I'm going to have a lot of those blanks. I turn off the bevel because I don't need it typically. And now we're going to unlock our ground, and I'm going to type in 0. And in here, I'm going to type in something around 13. Yeah, 13. Now we've pretty much just created the same thing, and it's fitting exactly the plane that we've created. And if I want to, I can just add a little bit of extrusion. So we pretty much got it. I can copy the same setup, just pressing Control and V. Okay, and now we're going to be able to go to direction, type in 90, and that way we are going to be able to create the same thing without really losing even a second. So this is easier, faster, and a little bit more efficient. But because I don't want you to be installing any scripts for a video like this, I decided to just go for built-in options in 3ds Max, although I know that some of them are going to be, let's say, a bit longer. So Guys, I think that we're going to pretty much end this webinar here because we are already 1.5 hours in it, and I believe that leaving materials and exact setup for the lighting for the next time is going to be the right approach. Thank you very much, Ravi, for watching me. Guys, remember to if you could, please make sure to like this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel, because we're going to make part 2 for this interior once we post the CAD file for you to follow along. Once you build a little bit more, make sure to tag us on Instagram so you too will be able to create the same shots, and we're going to see who made it look better. I'm looking forward to seeing more creative approaches from you. Also, guys, meanwhile, while we're talking about this, next time I'm also going to show you how to create this animation where we've got this laser going through our room. Or maybe if nobody is interested in that, we're just going to focus on nice materials. But in this case, we're going to make sure to go over everything. And at the same time, what I would like you to do is please make sure to share this video with your friends. Make sure to, well, subscribe to us and like this video again. You don't even know how much this helps us. Like, subscribe. Although everybody says this, I really need to do it as well. On top of that, I would also like to add that Viz Academy is an online school, so if you want to know a little bit more about us and our students, make sure to visit Viz Academy Co. UK and see the available dates. You can also go to our freebies once you create your own account. There's a plethora of 3D models that are going to be extremely helpful, and I'm going to share a few models that are going to be used in this video, and as long as we manage to do that, we're going to upload those to our platform in upcoming days. So make sure to visit our website. Also follow us on Instagram, because you can see a lot of our students' work, and that thing is really worth it. So just a quick Viz Academy. Let's go. Second. Okay, I've got it. Sometimes I just forget about what we've got. Meanwhile, okay, allow cookies. Thank you. So everything we added to our Instagram is related to our students, in a sense that we're either working on files that were created by our students, we're posting images created by our students, or something that's going to help you. Also, I would like to give you a quick shout out to our new 3ds Max short training that you're going to be able to enjoy and prepare better for the bigger part. So more details on our website. So make sure to visit our website and sign up for our training, or buy yourself the mini course. That's going to mini training that's going to be well, enough for you to learn something about 3ds Max, and it is going to help you get started. So this is it for today. Thank you very much for your attention. We're going to continue this journey next time, probably next Thursday or Thursday after that, depending on how much likes we're going to get. So thank you once again. See you next time, and well, till the next time. Bye bye.